This is the role of cinema in India's public debate panel. I'm Lorraine Ali. I'm based in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles Times. Just really quickly, I want to make a quick introduction and then I'm going to throw it to both of you. The film industry produces more films per year than any other country, and that means 1,500 to 2,000 films annually. Bollywood alone produces twice as many films as Hollywood, although Hollywood's ego and mouthpiece and money-making would make you think that they are actually superior in that area, but they're not. And I say that as a person from Los Angeles. Regional cinema in languages other than Hindi account for some 43% of the national box office in India. So, in short, this is a really prolific and diverse industry, and one that, at its best, reflects or addresses issues that are facing the Indian public, meaning questions of cultural identity, nationalism, religion, sexuality. And we're here to talk about where Indian cinema is today in terms of influencing and reflecting the national dialogue of India. I have here today two experts that know way more than I do about this very subject. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves and just say who you are, and then you can give your little slice on this hugely diverse topic.
My name is Prakash Belawadi. I'm from Bangalore, which is in South India, now called Bengaluru. I'm really a theater person. I've been a journalist for many years in the past, and occasionally even now. And I must start with a disclaimer that I probably will not be accepted as a representative fully of Bollywood, because they would see me as a revist, because I've been acting only for the last 3 or 4 years with any seriousness. Although I've been quite popular and acted in some 25 films in the last 3 or 4 years, I still would not be representative of Bollywood. The other thing I should say is, I would mostly talk about Bollywood, which refers to cinema produced, initially mainly out of Bollywood, very early years in Kolkata, but now Mumbai. And it represents all of India, at least it would like to think it represents all of India. I'm leaving out regional cinema, although it mostly is, the commercial cinema is mostly like Bollywood, with this big difference that it does not depend on a crossover language audience. It depends on its own, like where I come from, Kannada cinema will depend mostly on a Kannada knowing audience. Whereas Bollywood has this desi, all India flavor, and people from many languages in India actually would watch Bollywood cinema. And I'm restricting myself to commercial cinema, although artistic cinema, independent cinema does grapple with issues of India in troubling ways, kind of edgy ways. Commercial cinema would mostly confirm the values that prevail in our society. Now the question is, does it reflect any kind of Indian reality? Bollywood is located in the market, and the market does not map Indian reality politically or even socially. I can give you a funny example. Many of you will be shocked to know that the most prevalent form of dealing with the dead, of funerary rites, would be burial in South India, not cremation. But these memes are made of film, and they're made for funny reasons, because in sunset you can show funeral, because the flame is visible only when it's dark. So you'll get an impression that people are actually cremating the dead in the dark. But it's visible then only, that's why the scene is set like that. I'm saying I could go on like this. There are all kinds of memes that are there in film that have nothing to do with our reality. Indian reality is that we are actually divided by many, many identities. Geographically as states and provinces, or union territories as we call them. We're divided by language, by ethnicities, by, of course, caste, by religion, by language. And we claim these different identities, and this is very close to us. Some famous writer once said that the only political leader you can abuse in India freely is Mahatma Gandhi. Nobody will attack you. Anybody else you mention and criticize, people affiliated to that group or identity to your community will come and attack you. The same thing goes, you can be abusive about India, almost nobody minds except some nationalist, people who claim themselves as nationalists, but very few people. But if you abuse any section of community by any identity, that's probably going to be seen as greater provocation. So what Indian commercial cinema does, because it needs to deal with a market that actually runs across and includes so many identities, is that it tries to suppress identities. So in commercial cinema, caste is usually not present. Names are neutralized so that they don't reflect caste really. Very rarely, if at all. Or if it's there, it doesn't matter. It's not an important identity. When you deal with an intercaste or intercommunal, intercommunity marriage or love, for instance, what you would do is, it's the girl who is from the other. The girl has to be from the minority side of any identity. It cannot be because scoring the girl is trophy, but losing the guy is to lose prestige for the identity. So it's a very important question. So even if it's done so mildly that you don't see it. Now, for instance, free will or agency with love, somebody you're attracted to, or sexuality, for instance, it's completely untrue. Like, it's just not possible. If somebody went out and tried to marry somebody they liked, it may work in a very urban setting, or in a very special setting, or if they eloped and never came back. Otherwise, they'll be in real trouble. We have institutions like village panchayats. And by the way, commercial cinema is very likely to valorize vigilante justice, and justice privately delivered by a hero than what comes from the courts. So none of this is true. But I don't want to be sounding like I'm all negative about this. Javed Akhtar, one of our great poets and lyricists, said that Indian cinema is not reflecting reality, but it's reflecting dreams and aspirations. A unique contribution to cinema itself is the song in Indian films. It's changed a lot of late. People wearing New York police uniforms will be dancing in the Alps now, but that's not how it was before. The origin of it was different. The village simpleton could say something in song that he could not say in speech because it would be unreal. So Raj Kapoor can say, "Kisi ke muskurato pe ho nisar," Devanand can say, "De dil na hota bechara." I mean, there are songs and songs. And there was this song always given to the male, of course, who comes in the beginning of the movie usually, and he walks, even in Kannada cinema. Rajkumar says, "Nagu naguta, nali nali." This is the aspirational song. And this person is saying something from the heart. He's not educated enough to say this most times. He cannot say such complex ideas. He cannot articulate it intellectually, but he can be felt from the heart, and that can come in song as great poetry. And this was done. Actually, that has gone away, a lot now, and some of it is coming back now. But the thing is, in the song, the aspiration was there. And and maybe people want to be better, and everybody is waiting for the other side to respond so that they'll be generous, perhaps, And I think the Indian cinema song is aspirational and does reflect how reality ought to be, perhaps. Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai, sabko mera salam, kind of thing, that aspiration is there, I think. From my own personal examples, I could say that some confidence and reconciliation is happening in new cinema from Hollywood. It positions itself as Bollywood film, but it does not depend on song and dance. It depends on great stories, and it borrows from immediate or even slightly 15-year-old history. I've acted in some of those films. I've acted in Talwar. It's a case that is pending, but it's still there. I acted in Airlift, which dealt with the largest airlift operation in the world when Indians were rescued, evacuated from Kuwait, when Saddam invaded Kuwait. I've acted in a Malayalam film where Indian nurses have been rescued. So there is for the first time, or you saw Neerja, about the hijacking of the plane, For the first time, some confidence is there, and I'm hopeful that the young people who are making new films will look at Indian reality squarely in the eye and not be afraid to tell like it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine, and thanks, Prakash. It gives me great pleasure to be part of this plenary. And I think that Prakash has actually made way for my presentation in some ways, because I will be talking a little bit about this new cinema, but because I took Susan's time restriction very seriously, I have written it out so that I do not cross the time limit.
Okay, well, I'm not going to be timing you like this, I promise.
Okay. So Bollywood or Bombay cinema, because of its wide reach and tremendous popularity, has often been at the center of public debates for a variety of reasons. The debates are frequently centered on its negative impact, thereby holding it responsible for a variety of real and imagined social ills. Contemporary scholarship on reception and spectatorial practices has established that cinema has a deep and complex and unpredictable relationship with the world that cannot be explained through simplistic notions of causality. Another impulse has been to dismiss popular cinema as escapist fare, not worthy of serious reflection. It was only in the late 1980s and the early 1990s that Bombay cinema began to receive serious scholarly attention. Bombay cinema's continuing entanglement in censorship controversies have also been subjects of public debate. Debates on censorship are quick to get media attention, but these are Bombay cinema's largely accidental detours into the realm of public debate. In this presentation, I would like to draw attention to an emergent constellation of films that are seeking to make informed interventions into deeply contentious, ongoing, and unresolved public debates. One such intervention is Hansal Mehta's feature film, Aligarh, made in 2016, based on the real-life events that unfolded in the life of Professor S.R. Siras, who was chairman, Department of Modern Indian Languages in Aligarh Muslim University, or AMU, in the state of Uttar Pradesh. On February 8, 2010, 3 intruders entered Professor Siras's apartment and secretly filmed him having consensual sex with a rickshaw puller. The intruders, who allowed the rickshaw puller to leave, forced the professor to be photographed without his clothes and threatened to leak them to the press. While a traumatized Siras pleaded with them, senior officials of the university, including the proctor, arrived as if on cue. The next day, Siras was shocked to discover that the incident was in the front pages of all the newspapers. That very day, the university suspended him, ordered him to vacate his accommodation within 7 days, and shortly after, he was charge-sheeted for committing an act of misconduct by indulging in immoral sexual activity in contravention of the basic moral ethics of the institution, thereby tarnishing the image of the university. Overnight, the professor became an outcast. Aligarh is about the unfolding events following the night of criminal intrusion, when the mundane life of the reclusive professor turns into a nightmare played out in full public glare. The irony was that the humiliation of Professor Siras and the violation of his fundamental rights came right after the Delhi High Court had passed its historic 2009 judgment decriminalizing homosexuality. Subsequently, after that, in 2013, the Supreme Court overturned the judgment, but right now the curative petition is pending before a 5-judge constitutional bench. So there's hope. The harrowing experience of Professor Siras and the responses on campus have been meticulously recorded by sympathetic journalists and an independent fact-finding committee comprising of human rights activists from across India. Supportive colleagues and LGBT activists persuaded Siraz to file a writ petition. On April 1, 2010, the Allahabad High Court, acting on the writ petition, maintained that the professor's right to privacy had been violated. They ordered AMU to revoke the suspension order and reinstate the professor. On April 7, 2010, one day before the notice of the High Court reached the university, Siraz died under mysterious circumstances. Murder was suspected and arrests were made, but the case was closed due to lack of evidence. The perpetrators are still roaming free. It is clear from what we now know that the entire exercise was masterminded by vested interests within the university. The morality argument was a smokescreen to mobilize public opinion. The committee report clearly shows that opinion on the campus was sharply divided. A large number of students and teachers felt that the professor's right to privacy had been violated, and this view was held by many who disapproved of homosexuality, even those who did. This is not the first time that Bombay cinema has engaged with fiercely debated public controversies. The notorious Nanavati case has found several iterations in Bombay cinema. In April 1957, Commander K.M. Nanavati, a naval officer, had shot and killed Prem Ahuja, his wife Sylvia's lover. Nanavati surrendered to the police but later changed his version to say that he had killed in self-defense. The jury, the last that sat in the Indian legal system, declared Nanavati guilty, a decision that was upheld by the Supreme Court in 1961. The case had become highly politicized and polarized, resulting in Nanavati getting pardoned in 1964 by the governor of Maharashtra. The first cinematic version of the Nanavati case, Ye Raaste Hain Pyar Ke, The Road to Love is a loose translation, was released in 1961, while the latest version, Rustam, has released just last month. So the first one was in 1961, so it's literally running in a theater near you. So most of the cinematic iterations of the case have dealt with the morality of adultery and murder, with almost all the films resolving the issue in favor of murder, that is, in favor of Nanavati, even though some of the texts make space, however fleeting, for Sylvia's point of view. The emergent constellation I'm pointing to is markedly different in ways that require further thought, yet distinctions are clear. These films make a determined and purposeful intervention through an immersion into the facts and details of the case. Most importantly, the films and the filmmakers are unafraid to take a public stance in favor of their arguments. Aligarh turns what first appeared to the public as a sensational sex scandal into a quiet and reflective film that mounts a challenge to a majoritarian moral impulse. To this end, the film is a tribute, atonement, and a cautionary tale. Similarly, Meghna Gulzar's 2015 film Talwar, in which Prakash has acted, is a discursive intervention in the high-profile Arushi Hemraj double murder case. Here again, the legal trial had been preceded by a sensationalist media trial driven by unsubstantiated claims about the moral profligacy of the parents who were held responsible for their daughter's death. Talwar, a desensationalized cinematic intervention, renders visible a significant narrative strand that had been drowned in the cacophony of the public media trial. Both films render visible marginalized narrative strands and point unmistakably to journalism's failure to maintain fairness, accuracy, viewpoint neutrality, and in certain cases, basic professional ethics. These films invite the audience to reflect on the complexity of the individual cases, as well as our own complicity in participating in sensational media trials. All films based on real events have to answer to contesting claims of authenticity. It is important to note that films, unlike a legal document or a newspaper report, have the ability to immerse us in a world of affect, sensation, and viscera. In the words of film scholar Terence McSweeney, popular cinema is a potent cultural artifact, a resonant and compelling cultural barometer, because it is a collection of visceral responses to the era, whether consciously designed by the filmmakers or not. The stunning achievement of Aligarh has been to invoke the sense of everyday dread and unease experienced by those living under the surveillant gaze. After the night of intrusion, Siraz becomes paranoid. When evening approaches, he starts barricading the doors and windows before settling down for a drink. He lives in fearful anticipation of the dreaded knock on the door. On the night of his death, Siraz suddenly sits up in bed. He seems to have heard something. He appears into the darkness and says, "Who's there?" The scene fades to black as the concluding text informs us that the police found traces of poison in Siraz's blood but ruled out foul play. The audience is left wondering, was it Siraz's paranoid imagination or was there somebody inside the house? These films, by rendering visible the narrative threads that have fallen through the cracks of mainstream media, so these films that actually render visible these narrative threads that have fallen through the cracks of the mainstream media act both as witnesses and archivists of the history of the present. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. That was incredibly illuminating from very different sections of the cinema world. I want to ask one thing and then open it up to questions, so we'll have 15 minutes for that. I'm trying to move this along quickly. So when we're talking about cinema, whether it's mainstream or independent, addressing some debates that are in society, perhaps even addressing some political hot topics, and of course, much more independent film than mainstream film is going to do this. What are some of the risks that a filmmaker runs doing that? Because I can say in Hollywood, it could mean killing your career if you're, weighing in on an unpopular subject. It could mean bad revenue at the box office, therefore killing your career. I mean, so what are some of the risks that you run here in doing that?
If you're making an artistic film, then the market doesn't matter because you could release it in festivals and you probably will get an award or two and your reputation really doesn't suffer. But if you're going to make a commercial film out of it, then you're going to spend a lot of money. It's just an incredible lot of money. It's getting more and more because of digital releases. You can release it on thousands of screens today. So they spend a lot of money on films. So it's a very big risk. You wouldn't do it. That's what it means. That's why it's so heartening that they position themselves as in a commercial world and they're able to make these films. But the problem is how you construct the film. Now the thing is, the hero of the film, for the longest time, I'll take an example of Amitabh Bachchan, which is a very big name. He was cast and molded as this angry young man, mainly by two film writers, Salim Javed, the pair. And usually he's like either an orphan, or he does not know parents, or has been separated from parents. He usually is free of this identity trap. That is the great thing. And once you do that, he can take a humanitarian stand. It was a very great trick to play because I would rate Salim Javed pair as the greatest scriptwriting pair, among the greatest script in the world, And they made him that, so he could actually really talk for the oppressed, for minorities, for women. He could befriend. He could have Muslim friends or Christian friends. It was possible because he was removed from the trap of identity. Other people try to copy this, but they don't have the skills that Salim and Javed had. So that is one way of avoiding the trap, I would say.
That's brilliant. I mean, I never really thought about it like that, but that is brilliant.
About the risks, I think the filmmakers themselves would be in a better position to answer that question. But I think the whole business about the multiplex economy has allowed for a different kind of film to be made. So, a diversity of practices. But what is also interesting is that, this Vishal Bhardwaj's film Haider, which has also done very well commercially, has actually been able to say a lot of things about the conflict in Kashmir that mainstream media is quite reluctant to talk about, and the only space where all those issues have been discussed is actually the independent documentary film movement. And I think that all these films, Aligarh or Talwar, they are actually engaging with the independent documentary film movement in a particular way, because that is the one place where you get to hear stories that you're not going to be, you won't actually be reading you'll have to search for those stories. They're not going to be staring at you in your face from your mainstream newspapers. I would say that it must be, when I was reading about or talking to people who were involved in, say, for instance, the making of Haider, it's a series of negotiations that you make, you know, what can you show, what can you not show, and that continues till the bitter end, you know, when you're trying to get a censor certificate, for instance. But I think that even if it's in bits and pieces and in fragments, you know, a film like Shahid, for instance, made by the same person who made the film Aligarh, about this young lawyer who used to fight the cases for youth who had been falsely accused of cases of terrorism. And this person was actually killed. And it was incredibly brave of Hansal Mehta to make that film, Shahid. And I think that, and he had to pay all kinds of price, you know, for that, because you immediately make yourself unpopular with certain, you know, kinds of people or certain kinds of groups, and sometimes the government. And but he has, you know, continued nevertheless and built up a kind of a niche constituency of people who look out for these films now. So I think that it's risky at one level, and at another level, it is creating a future audience, which I think will only grow, actually.
So at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions, and I guess we'll start back here.
Hi, I'm Mark Wallen with ABA Rowley. That was a fascinating presentation about the content of the films. Thank you. I'd like to, maybe you could talk a little bit about the celebrities and their use of celebrity, the actors, the writers, the directors. Are they, I believe that they are making statements more increasingly about social and cultural issues. Could you talk a little bit about that and the impact that they might have? Also, do they identify with political parties? Do they support political candidates? And does that also have an impact? Thanks.
You know, in the South, in the state of Tamil Nadu, for instance, the chief minister of the state now was a movie actress. She must have acted in some 250, 300 movies. She's the chief minister of the state. And the rival party leader was one of the most popular script writers in movies. The entire politics of that state actually is run by former movie stars. So there are language cultures in which movie actors matter in politics, and they're used. And some of them come to Parliament, our lawmaking body, and uselessly occupy chairs. But the thing is, in Hindi it's very difficult. Although there are Bollywood actors who have become members of Parliament, they've not been very effective because they really don't represent anything. You know, because it's a very important idea, otherwise they would not have been so popular. But of late, because of great pressure, since the new government has been elected, the government is under tremendous scrutiny, and quite correctly, that governments in India should be under scrutiny. There is a lot of articulation from very popular film stars about social issues. And they get into real trouble because of that, let me tell you. Because famously Shah Rukh Khan and Amir Khan, for saying the mildest possible things, have been in trouble. Whether that translates to losses in the box office is really difficult to tell. That requires a study, I think. We're just in the middle of it. Right now, it looks like a very big thing because of social media. But I don't know whether even the people who are writing against them will not go and watch their movies. So it's very difficult to tell at the moment. But it's true, it's there. Now even cricket. See, only two things are Indian in India, I would say, in popular terms. That's cricket and Bollywood. So it is. See, right now in my home state, in Karnataka, the Supreme Court has given a judgment that some water has to be released to the downstream state, which is Tamil Nadu, and there is not much water, but it's being released, and there is agitation going on in my state. Now, all the media in Tamil Nadu, from the same newspaper group, actually, when we were working in newspapers, we were told, if you're in this state, support this state. If you're in that state, support that state. So much for, objectivity in news, So we were told clearly. So on interstate issues, newspapers take a very clear stand in favor of that state. So it's really difficult, I think we are just emerging into all this social consciousness, and it's going to take some time. Maybe scholars can unpack this sometime in the future.
I just wanted to add just a little bit that I really do appreciate every time a celebrity does speak up for these issues, because they do have a lot to lose. And on the other hand, we have also discovered that they don't, as Prakash very correctly said, that perhaps as far as their box office collections are concerned, they may not always, though I do think that Salman Khan's Flying Kite with Narendra Modi did have an effect on the box office collections of Jai Ho. Not Bajrangi, it was Jai Ho actually, yes. But yes, I think but this is not the first time that the celebrities have actually spoken up, and I think one of the most fearless moments was when Dilip Kumar spoke up in favor of fire, and there was several Hindu right groups actually protested in front of his house. And
Devanand spoke against the emergency.
Devanand spoke against the emergency, but there was a bunch of people at that time who spoke up against. Yes, but when Dilip Kumar spoke up in favor of Deepa Mehta's fire, the attack was quite severe. The Hindu right attack on the film was very severe. The attack on the supporters of the film was very severe. And indeed, it was extremely fearless of him to have spoken up at that time. There's a hand.
Yeah, we have a question over here. Could you give him the mic? Can I just say in between that, in the States, we tend to, laugh when celebrities speak up politically, or we think we do until they run for president, and then we elect them, such as Reagan, or perhaps a TV reality star. So, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, quickly, my name is Syed, and I come from Chennai, journalist there. My first question, of course, it's a long thing to talk, but just to put it in short, the first question is about cliched entertainment. The Bollywood movie actually tries to laugh over the minorities, the marginalized section. If you want to have a buffoonery in the movie, you will bring a Parsi there, you will bring a Sikh there as a truck driver. These are all cliched entertainment which Bollywood provides. If you have any take on that, that's one point. The second point about your question, probably you have taken quite a long time on explaining Aligarh. I also have been following that, and I have been a student of that university. Basically, it's a clash between modernism and the conservatism. That was the issue all about. The film brought its own take on it. And most of these movies which come on the subject issue of these kind of it is basically non-major box office. They are basically issues which are presented to the people, and it is left to the audience to decide whether the filmmaker's solution they want to accept or they don't want to accept. So that's the point. That's just a comment. The last thing which I want to bring you here is the Indo-Pak relations and the Bollywood films. The Bollywood films, I feel, what I understand are in...
Yeah, we're going to run out of time, so if you
just 1 second. It's a very important thing. The Bollywood and Indo-Pak thing. The first set of movies which came was on the partition of India. The second kind of movies were on the border and, Indian nationalism. And the third set of movies which is coming right now started from Henna, and then from right now Happy Bhag Jayegi, and then before that you had Bajrangi Bhaijaan.
Okay, we have a question.
Professor, may I ask, Philippa from ABC in Sydney, you've written the book On Fire in 2010. It's almost 20 years since the film. What kind of social change has been brought about? You talked about the protests at the time, but how have you charted social change in the wake of the film Fire? Please, thank you.
Okay, yeah, there was 2 questions in there, so however you want to address it.
With your permission, I'll answer it in a personal way. Only one part. The first question. it's true that in movies, in popular movies, because without caring or with caring and not giving a damn, they do reflect the values that are there prevalent in society. So it's quite common to make fun of accents of South Indians, for instance, or treat stock characters as comic characters. One of the problems was that the people in the Rangareddy district said we resent being shown as comedians in popular Telugu cinema. So it's true. But from a personal example, I'll tell you, I'm a South Indian, and it's actually quite rare for South Indians to come into mainstream Bollywood film and act. And one of my conditions was that I wouldn't caricature this idea of accent. So I still speak with a South Indian accent. My English and my Hindi is like that. But nobody will ever comment on it because I'll just play that character. And I play Tamilian and Malayali, and I'm a Kannadiga. But I play these different roles without caricaturing the accent. I just behave like a South Indian. So I think even that is changing.
Yeah, I do agree with Prakash that, those, and you do see some of that even now, but I don't think that's the only thing that's happening. I think that there are all kinds of very interesting changes that are taking place. About Aligarh, I mean, I have nothing to add to what you said. It is possible to see that as a fight between something that is conservative and modern, or one could also see this kind of conservatism as part of modernity, so these are debatable. As far as the Indo-Pak thing, I think a lot of interesting things are happening. A film like Bajrangi Bhaijaan, Ek Tha Tiger, where this RAW agent and the ISI agent, played by Katrina Kaif, they refuse to come back. Usually this kind of an Indo-Pak romance, like not just the Indian films like Veer Zara, etc., but also Tere Pyar Mein, which is a Pakistani film, which along with Gadar became one of their biggest hits. It would always resolve the issue of where to go in favor of the man. So if it's a Pakistani Muslim man, the couple will settle down in Pakistan. If it is Veer Zara, they will come and settle in India. And in Ek Tha Tiger, what Kabir Khan does is that they refuse to come back to go to either India or Pakistan, and they say that we will make the world our home till ISI and RAW is dismantled. And I think that in many ways, even Sultan actually holds out a kind of a utopic possibility where you are not marked out for your religion, even though the religion is not erased, but that other identities have come to play. So I think that we are at a time when a lot of new directors are very aware of these issues.
But it's also
and
the diaspora market.
It could be the diaspora market, and but at the same time, I think that there are these filmmakers who are very aware of these issues. Just like you are very aware of what kind of roles you will play and you won't play, which may not have been the case for many actors in the past. Similarly, these directors are also making very self-conscious interventions. So I think that is something quite good, actually, to look forward to. As far as the fire question is concerned, that I think the fire allowed for the first public national debate on homosexuality. Every newspaper, every magazine, everybody talked about it. It threw it out into the public domain. But I think after that, I think the LGBT issues have actually been heightened by the work of the LGBT community. And that, particularly because this case has been ongoing, the one on the decriminalizing of homosexuality, that has made it very, very public. So I would say that there has been no film like Fire in that sense, because I think Fire actually has been quite extraordinary in what it did, but it did set a precedent for a variety of representations of same-sex love, and that has been its most important contribution. Thank you.
Can we just have this one last question?
Yeah. Finally, I think it's appreciated that West is taking interest in caste. We can't imagine India without talking about caste. Same as with cinema also, whether it is Hindi or Tamil or Bengali or any other cinema. I just wanted to disagree, sir, with your comment that some of the films, they may not give references of caste. it may not be there, or maybe the commercial films at least. I mean, but I think there's no single film in India, which, I mean, maybe a tall statement I'm giving, that you can't make out caste. I mean to say that caste is it not necessarily say Akira Sharma?
No, I understood your
It's there.
question, but you misunderstood me. What I'm trying to say is that is not what is played up, that is played down. It is inherent in it, of course. That's what we are saying. Popular cinema or commercial cinema does not question the values that are prevalent in society. They propagate them, they articulate them, but they do not express them in ways where you can identify that this is a caste thing, unless you look for it. They look to suppress that, although they play it. I mean, that's what I mean.
I just want to add to what Kusuma is saying. Actually, at some level, I agree with you. And I think that in the films in the South, for instance, if you were to look at S.V. Srinivas's work and the way the fan clubs work, for instance, you know, so the fans can read the cast in ways that maybe people who are not used to that convention won't read. So I think
Bollywood, that's why
yeah, that's right. You were talking about Bollywood. That's right.
Yeah, I am Azizur Rahman from Bangladesh. I know that commercial films of India's worldwide market, it has been very popular. I want to know, do you have any research that why the Indian films are so popular across the globe? Is it for rhythmic language, Hindi language, or it's for his story, or it's a strong market? And my another question is that, do you have any research that according to the region, which region from where you actually earn more in terms of revenue? Thank you.
You know, maybe we should have asked why Hollywood films are popular everywhere. For a Bollywood Indian film to be popular in Asia or in Africa, we should not have been surprised as actually. But the thing is, these are the questions we ask because we accept popularity so quickly. You know, it comes, the American dream is sold through Hollywood, at least it was to us. I don't know how it is anymore, you know, because now they show Friends and it's not, so, but you know, but earlier it was different. So I think it's popular because it has romance and song and heroism, and this is the aspirational stuff everybody wants. That's what I think. But I made one film and it bombed, so I'm not.
But just a very quick answer is that the question you're asking is why is popular culture popular? And I think there's a lot of academic work on that, and that can help us understand why popular culture is popular. And I would say that it's not because of the language Hindi, because states like Kerala and Bengal were very hostile to Hindi as a national language. And while we had that political stance when we were growing up, we were also very fond of Bombay cinema. And the popularity of Hindustani, which is a mix of Hindi and Urdu, is due to the large circulation of Bombay cinema. And I think that a range of works will actually, scholarly work, will give you a sense of why that is the case. And it's not, the language is not what they're saying, it's also the form. And one of the things that Prakash talked about, and I cannot emphasize the importance of that, is the song and dance. It's very unique to Bombay cinema.
Okay, I'd like to thank you both so much for being on the panel. This was excellent. And thank you for your great questions.